Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and today I have a treat. I get to talk with an old friend, Bernard Dreano, who is in Paris, and we're going to have a conversation about a topic that I know much too little about, but where he's an expert, and that is the recent and maybe still ongoing conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Um, Bernard and I knew each other a little bit years and years ago when I was active in the Helsinki Citizens Assembly, and he was even more active. It was toward the end of the Cold War, and we had meetings between Eastern and Western activists all over Europe, often in Eastern Europe. And after the Cold War ended, the organization continued for a while, and I was surprised to find that there are still remnants of the Helsinki Citizens Assembly in France, and he's the head of it, I guess, the Helsinki Citizens Assembly of Paris, right? So Bernard is an expert on this region, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the whole Caucasus region. He wrote a book. It's available in French, War and Peace in the Caucasus. Hello, Bernard. How are you?
Hello,
Great
fine.
to see you. Why don't you hold your book up so that people can at least see the cover?
It was published in 2008 and it's called War and Peace in the Caucasus.
Empires, Peoples, and Cultures. Is that what it says?
Empires, peoples, and nations.
Nations. Okay.
Yeah, it's both historical and political.
All right. Well, I had a conversation with Bernard a week or two ago and asked him to help me get a little grasp of what has gone on in the region. And he gave me what turned out to be a wonderful impromptu lecture. So I wish I had had my computer recorder going at the time because I learned a lot from him. But in my old age, not all of it sticks very well. So if you'll, Bernard, if you'll just sort of do what we did the other day, where you give me your understanding of the background of this conflict, which is certainly not a new conflict, and then you can bring us up to date on what's going on now. By the way, I just was looking at the news, and I see that the Armenians are burning their houses down rather than simply leaving quietly because there's been a ceasefire. And I understand some Armenians are going to have to vacate an area that they've called home. So this sounds like a sad situation.
Okay, well, I will try my best because my English is not always perfect. But and I'm not going to go back to the centuries, only let's say till the end of Soviet Union. At the end of Soviet Union, this region called South Caucasus was like that. I don't.
He's drawn a wonderful map, and by hand. Okay, so we have Russian Federation up above, then the Caspian Sea, and the Black Sea over here. So you're between the Caspian and the Georgian Sea, Black Sea, and we have Georgia, Azerbaijan on the right, Turkey, and then Armenia, and then Nagorno-Karabakh is down here someplace, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Good. Now you've got some towns there, but I guess we'll get to those towns when the time comes.
Yeah.
My memory was that you used to have two big empires that were sort of adjacent to each other in that region, the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire. And I wonder if any of the tensions between these two peoples, the Azeris and the Armenians, could be traced back to any of the political alliances that were alive in those old days. Ottoman Empire.
The Persian Empire in the south. So the Persian Empire in the south, and all the region we are going.
I'd forgotten the Persians.
Yeah, and all the region we are going to speak about were in the Persian Empire historically. I mean, what is now Nagorno-Karabakh or most of Armenia today were in the Persian Empire, and they became controlled by and not in the Ottoman Empire,
Oh.
And they were controlled by the Russian Empire at the end of the 19th century, let's say. And of course, after the Russian Empire was Soviet Union. And in Soviet Union, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, inside Soviet Union. On this map, what is written inside each republic, some autonomous entities, sometimes called autonomous republic, sometimes called autonomous territory. They are in red in this map.
Mm-hmm. Now, Azerbaijan and Armenia were republics.
Was republics. Republics was meaning that they had theoretically the right to quit Soviet Union, to secede. But the autonomous territory within each of these republic had not the right to secede from their republic, to make secession. In the Azerbaijani Republic, you had there are two autonomous territories. One of them was Nagorno-Karabakh or High Karabakh, a territory where the population was in big majority Armenians. There was an autonomous territory within the Azerbaijani Republic. In the nearby Georgia, for example, you had three small autonomous territories, and two of them make secession during the 90s when the collapse of the Soviet Union through very violent wars. That was Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So the Karabakh question was not an isolated question during the fall of Soviet Union. It was a specific question because it was dividing, it was between Armenians and Azerbaijani, but it happens, some phenomena like that happens in other countries. If I take the territory of what is called the later Nagorno-Karabakh, the majority of the population was Armenians, but there was a big Azeri minority, especially in the town of Shusha, as the Azeri told it, or Shushi, as the Armenian told it.
Azeri, that is an ethnic word referring to a people.
Yes, right? Azeri is an ethnic
word. When you say Azerbaijani, you mean citizens of Azerbaijan.
Exactly.
And the term ethnic, Azeri, refers to the ethnicity.
So the Azeri, it's an ethnicity, it's Turkish-speaking people. They are the vast majority of Azerbaijan, but there are other minorities in Azerbaijan, like Russians, like Tatars, like a lot of small minorities, Legwish, which are not Azeris, but Azeris, Azerbaijanis are the citizens of Azerbaijan, and Azeris are the majority of the citizens of the big majority of the citizens of Azerbaijan. Mm-hmm. The same thing for the other country. In Georgia, for example, you have 200,000 Azeris and 250,000 Armenians living in Georgia. Oh. And in Russia today, you have 2 million Armenians and 2 million Azeri.
Oh, okay. That sounds like more people in Russia than in Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Yeah. And
is that right?
In Iran, you have 20 million Azeri.
Oh.
And in Azerbaijan, only 10 million Azeri. So the majority of the Azeri are living outside Azerbaijan, and the majority of Armenians are living outside Armenia also.
And was that because some of them had to flee during one of the wars? Or they've had many wars?
Because of the wars, and it's also mainly because of economical reasons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, does that mean that the expatriate groups have any influence in Armenia and Azerbaijan, or are they simply onlookers rooting for their side?
They have some, well, they are supporting their side, but they have some influence, especially the Armenian diaspora, which is mainly in the Western countries and Russia. They have some influence, yes.
Okay, onward. Now then, where do we start? You want to start with the breakup of the Soviet Union?
Yeah, break of the Soviet Union. So in 1988, there was a big movement in Armenia for democracy. And during this movement, there was also the expression, we want to reunify with the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. We don't want Nagorno-Karabakh to be anymore under the control of Azerbaijan. And in the chaos of this situation, it started a war. It was a very, very chaotic period between 1988 till 1994, not only between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also in Georgia. There was a civil war in Georgia and a lot of troubles. The war became extremely violent, and the result of that was a massive movement of population. A lot of people living, for example, there was 200,000 inhabitants of Baku. Baku was 1 million and something inhabitants at that time, much more today. But there was 200, more than 10% of the population was Armenian. And the Armenian had to flee because of the war. At the same time, of course, some Azeris living in Armenia had to flee. So you had massive movement of population during this period, hundreds of thousands, in all directions. People coming from Armenia, going to Azerbaijan, going to Armenia, going to Georgia, going outside, and the war itself. And the war itself started in 1988. And
it was started by Armenia, right?
No, it was started by everybody. I mean, Armenian wanted to free Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijani want to stop them. The Soviet Union, still existing at that time, tried to stop it and supported the Azerbaijani at the beginning. Then it became total chaos, and everybody was fighting everybody. And at the end of this war, in 1994, the Armenian, which was the weakest group in a way, won the war. Because Azerbaijan totally collapsed. And at the end of the war, I show you the map.
Oh, that's the end of the war. Have you made two different maps? You have
maybe controls at the end of the war, 1994. The Armenians were controlling nearly the whole of Nagorno-Karabakh and a very big territory, which was previously Azerbaijani, outside Nagorno-Karabakh. It's in green on the map.
Okay, now there's this thing called Kelsajar. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, Kelsajar is one of the places.
Okay, you've put some of these stripes. Now that those stripes refer to, and here we have Lakhchin. Lakhchin? Okay, I see them. I can't hear you.
This territory was controlled by the Armenian at the end of the war, and all the population, which was Azeri, was thrown away. It was emptied from its own whole population, which was 99% or 95% Azeri. And the Armenian occupies what the Azerbaijani calls the 7th district. So the Armenians got Nagorno-Karabakh as a whole, and of course the local Azeri population has to flow away, and this 7th district. And that's very, very important to remind, because that means that tens of thousands of Azeri people were obliged to leave the region because of the Armenian victory. And they were parked in a refugee camp. And of course, the Azerbaijani government used this refugee to say, we want the revenge. That was 1994. At that time, the president of Armenia, the victor, the one who gets the victory, called Levon Ter-Petrosyan, a very brilliant person, understood that the Armenian was in position of force. They had won the war. It was time to negotiate. And he was ready to leave back some of his territory that they had occupied in exchange of peace. But because of that, he was thrown down by a coup d'etat by Armenian nationalists. The international community had created a special group to monitor negotiation, group called the Minsk Group, a group of 14 countries with three leaders, presidency of 3 countries, Russia, United States, and France. So this group, the group of Minsk, Minsk Group, was supposed to give a framework for negotiation. It was very complicated because, of course, first Armenia wanted to keep its territories, the territories it has won, and Azerbaijan wanted to have a revenge. Also, Russia and United States have different interests. Remember that Azerbaijan is a very rich oil country, where the British and the Americans have very big interest, especially British Petroleum, but also ExxonMobil and things like that, and companies like that. And so there was a complicated game, but this Minsk group proposed some solutions. Basically, the solution was to give to the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh itself a specific provisional statute, and to organize election to decide what will be the final statute, and to do that under international protection, blue helmet or whatsoever, and for the Armenian to give back 5 of the 7 districts, and to keep 2 districts, those that I will show on the map, those of Lachin and Kelbajar, to assure a continuity of territory between Karabakh and Armenia proper. You see?
Okay, now that's Lachin. I see that. And
so the idea was to give this territory to Armenia and to the
out of the 7 territories, those 2, but those are pretty big territories.
Yeah, they are pretty big, but they are relatively empty. I mean, it's mountains.
I see. Well, it looks though from the map as if these surrounding territories are about equal, if not larger, than Armenia itself.
No, it's not larger than Armenia, but it's much larger than Karabakh itself.
Much larger
than the Nagorno-Karabakh itself, yes.
Okay.
Okay. And so the idea was, if we want negotiations, the Armenians have to give back at least 5 of these territories, and 7, and the final statute of Nagorno-Karabakh itself and of the whole region will be decided after consultation of the population, which means also that the refugees must have the right to come back. So that was the principle. It's called the Madrid principle because they were established in Madrid. But both Azerbaijan and Armenia refused this principle, and nobody in the international community decided to force this country to accept it.
Now, Petrosian himself would have accepted it, but he'd been
of course he had already accepted it, and that's why he was thrown out.
Okay.
And so we had a deadlock, and the Armenian had the impression that they had won, and they would be like that for forever, because they have the impression that there's the support of the Western countries, that the support of Russia. You have an agreement, an international treaty with Russia, and that they had the support of the Armenian diaspora. So they had the impression they were very strong. Unfortunately, it's not the case. I mean, the Azerbaijani was getting stronger and stronger because they had a lot of money because of oil and gas. And they started to build a strong army with Russian weapons, also with Turkish weapons and the support of Turkey, and with the support of Israel, which is not well known.
That is strange. Strange bedfellows.
Yeah, why Israel was supporting Azerbaijan? Because you could imagine that Israel will support Armenia, because in a way the fate of Armenian people and the fate of the Jews and the Israelis are a bit the same. No, there was another question there. Israel was allied with Azerbaijan because it's a place to look for Iran. There are some permanent spy device of the Israelis, of the Mossad, in Azerbaijan to get information about what's going on in Iran. And it's so the between Armenia and at the same time, Iran had very good relations with Armenia. During the first war, Iran saved Armenia. All the weapons and all the fuel and all the fundamental device for Armenia came through Iran.
When you say the first war, you mean the 1990s war?
Yes, the
That was
1990s
what,
war.
92, 94?
From 88 to 94.
So it was longer than I
And
realized.
during all that time, the border between Iran and Armenia was open, and all the foods, all the munitions came from there.
Okay.
So we are not at all in what the story that is called today a fight between Muslims and Christians. You know, it's very, very different in reality.
It really had nothing to do with religion. It had to do
with nationalism.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, with nationalism and with politics,
Uh-huh.
and also a little with economy because of the oil in Azerbaijan. But then, how we come to the situation in 2020? So the Armenian was totally convinced that they could stay forever. The Azerbaijani were waiting for their revenge. And the negotiation was totally blocked after 2011. Nobody was pressing anything anymore about the negotiation. Everybody has something else to do. I mean, the Western country was not a good relation with Azerbaijan, and that was very good for oil, and there was and gas. I also didn't say that the most of the 3/4 of the oil and especially gas used by the Israelis is coming from Azerbaijan through Turkey.
So that's another reason for them to be favoring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if, of course, the public opinion in Israel is much more pro-Armenian, but the governments, you know, real politics, they like Azerbaijan. And of course, unfortunately, the Armenian leaders didn't understood exactly that. And the Azerbaijan during the beginning of the 20th century, of the 2000 years, were controlled by the Aliyev family, and especially by the leader today, Ilham Aliyev. And it's a corrupt dictatorship. It's a sort of mafia-type government using the money of oil and gas to become extremely rich. And of course, the country as itself became more rich, but the inequalities within the country became more and more strong, more and more big, more and more visible. So you had several uprisings in Azerbaijan, social uprising.
Against the government.
Against the government.
Not about Armenia.
No, but the government was able to crush this uprising with two weapons. First, police, and second, nationalism. Don't fight the government, fight the Armenian.
Mm.
That was on the Azerbaijani side. And a lot of peace activists or human rights activists were arrested in Azerbaijan, and the freedom of press was nearly disappeared. At the same time, in Armenia, it was a bit the same, not so bad, but a bit the same. The power was controlled by people coming from Nagorno-Karabakh, Robert Kocharyan and Serge Sarkisian, who became president and prime minister of Armenia. Armenia, not from only Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia as a whole. And it's
so when was this when Petrosian he'd been kicked out of?
He has been kicked
out of Armenia, but where did he go?
No, he stayed in Armenia, but he was kicked down from power.
But he didn't have any power, or did he have any?
No, he had totally lost power. Yes. And the power was totally controlled by people coming from Nagorno-Karabakh, Robert Kocharyan and Serge Sarkisian. They were one after the other the president of Armenia, prime minister and president. They were very corrupt and also had some direct link with Vladimir Putin in Kremlin. There was also a uprising against these people in Armenia. Armenia was less a dictatorship than Azerbaijan. There was a relative freedom of speech and organization. And at the end, in 2018, there was a revolution in Armenia. The revolution was led by a guy called Nikol Pashinyan, and he used the model of Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a friend of some of my friends in Armenia at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to do a Gandhian-like non-violent mobilization of the people against the corrupt government.
Now, this is only a couple of years ago, right?
2 years ago,
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. And he succeeded. I mean, they got power. And they made a real non-violent revolution. There are not so many successful non-violent revolution. It was one. I mean, they really succeeded. And of course, everybody was very happy. And everybody was expecting that Nikol Pashinyan was going to open doors for new negotiation with Azerbaijan about Karabakh. He said he was going to do that. But he didn't do
didn't
it.
he? Didn't he try? And
No, he didn't really
Bill
try.
Carr Harris told me that he'd offered, but Azerbaijan, Aliyev said no.
No, that's not true. I mean, of course, the position of Azerbaijan from the beginning and of Armenia was always to say no at the first when there was a new round of negotiations, the first position of the two warring party was to say no. But of course, after some pressure, they could change their mind. Well, Pashinyan arriving to power, he said, okay, we want to open new negotiation. But then he was under pressure inside Armenia because he was considered as a soft pacifist, and yet to show that he was not, Sarkisian and Pashinyan was still there. And there had some basis in the society. So to show that he was a tough guy, he made very nationalistic statements, and especially explaining that the occupied 7th district was part of Arstak. Arstak is the Armenian name for Nagorno-Karabakh.
Oh, I've seen that word, A-F-K-T-A-K.
Yes, yeah, Arstak.
Arstak is the Armenian word for Karabakh.
Yeah, but at the beginning, when the people were speaking of Arstak, Arstak is a very old name. It's to go back to the 6th century. There was a kingdom, Armenian kingdom called like that in the 6th century. And nobody used the word Arstak since centuries. But then it came back. At the beginning, meaning only Nagorno-Karabakh. But more and more, it was meaning Nagorno-Karabakh plus the 7th district, which of course is not the same. Because if you say that, that means that you don't want to negotiate.
Why?
Because the bargaining possibility from the beginning, Ter Petrosyan was knowing that very well, is to give back to Armenia at least 5 of these 7 districts. If you say they are part of they are Armenian forever, they are part of Arstak, you just say, go to hell with your negotiation. But that was totally crazy to do such a thing in 2019, because already everybody knew that the Azerbaijani was ready to go to war. That started a small war in 2016, showing that they were ready and saying, I am a tough guy. You are not going to be able to do anything. At the moment where, military speaking, you are in a very, very, very bad situation. I mean, the balance of force, for example, to give you an example, the number of tanks of Azerbaijan was double than the number of tanks of Armenia. But the Azerbaijani had also very, very, very modern drones from Israel and from Turkey. And the Armenian had nothing to face these drones. So
you said something about drones.
Yeah, these drones. It's the first war where the first time in history that the drones are the essential weapons of a war. I mean, the Azerbaijani won the war with their soldiers. They won the war also, but it's much less important, with some mercenaries coming from Syria. But basically, they won the war with their drones, and the Israeli and Turkish drones.
And then they would put little bombs on on a drone, and then they would drop these bombs.
Yeah, because these drones, of course, because it's a kind of traditional war. I mean, between two countries, two armies fighting each other for territory, and the drones make possible for those people who have the drones to attack some very, very precisely the position of the other 50 meters or 200 meters away.
How about, you mentioned tanks. I can't visualize tanks in a very mountainous area. Isn't all of this region very mountainous?
Yes, it is very mountainous, but
Tanks be
well,
able to have a tank war there?
no, it's most of the time small tanks, which are, but they are more used to occupy positions than to take positions.
Oh.
You take position with bombing by drones and then sending troops.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a lot of casualties in this war. We don't know exactly how many, maybe 5,000, maybe more. But it's essentially 99% young boys, young soldiers, young conscripts from the two countries, because they were just fighting directly. I mean, like in the First World War, with the drones used to destroy the position of the enemy, and that's explained. And from the beginning of the war, the Azerbaijani took over mainly because of their drones. The Russian was first of all, the Russian was selling weapons both to Azerbaijan and to Armenia.
Oh, that is terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible to send weapons at all, but it's worse to send it to both sides. That's all.
Of course. And of course, it's perfect for a weapon seller. You can send. Then the Russian had their defense treaty with Armenia, but concerning only the territory of Armenia proper, not Karabakh. So they didn't move because Karabakh was on stake, not Armenia proper. In fact, the Russian was waiting before the Azerbaijani had a strong victory. And at the very moment when the Azerbaijani had a strong victory, the Russian immediately intervened to say, okay, stop it. We don't want the Azerbaijani to go further. And we are going to control the situation. That was the 9th of November, this few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the victory of the Azerbaijani was created by the takeover of the town of Shushi as the Armenian state, or Shusha as the Azerbaijani state. Why? For two reasons, not only for one, for two reasons. First reason is strategic. When you control Shushi, you control the road between the main road between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, and you have under your fire 12 kilometers down. You're on a hill, and just down 20 kilometers below, you have Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, where half of the population is living.
Mm-hmm. What's the population of Stepanakert?
150,000 inhabitants. Half of them in Stepanakert.
Not such a big city.
It's very small country. I mean, it's a very small.
Yeah.
And Stepanakert is 70,000 inhabitants. Susha is 5,000. But the other reason why Sushi is so important is that before Soviet Union, at the time of the Russian Empire, Shushi or Shusha was the capital of the region and was a very important cultural center for the Azeri. There was a school of music which had influence in the whole region. Mm. There was some poets who were coming from Shusha, and they called Shusha, the Azeri, the Jerusalem of Caucasus.
So this is the Azeri Cultural Center.
Yeah, it was an Azeri cultural center, absolutely. So to take Shushi was, militarily speaking, a victory, but symbolically speaking, also a victory. And so the very day when the Azerbaijani troops took Shushi, Vladimir Putin said, okay, game over. The Azerbaijani have won. We don't want them to win more. We don't want them to enter in Stepanakert because that would mean too many casualties. We stopped the war and we imposed a ceasefire. The ceasefire is in the benefit of Azerbaijani. I can shortly explain how. Just showing once again a map. I explain the map, and I will show it again. So the striped part is controlled by the Azerbaijani troop. The pointed part is supposed to be given back by the Armenian to the Azerbaijani.
Now that's as of today.
Yeah, that's the situation today.
Today. The striped part is controlled by Azerbaijan, and what else now? Oh, that goes all the way around Nagorno-Karabakh. Does
Yeah,
surrounds it? Does it?
yeah, it's around totally Nagorno-Karabakh. Whether it's already controlled by Azerbaijanis, the strike part, or the point of that, it has to
Uh,
be withdrawn in the coming days.
okay. Well, I mean, too bad because Nagorno-Karabakh. Then, if they're Armenian, they're completely under the control of Azerbaijan. It
Well,
was.
they are not exactly under the control of Azerbaijan because the rest of it, where the Armenians are, is controlled by the Russian. So there, it's
Okay,
became
so
a
they
sort of.
used to have their troops in these surrounding territories. Those Armenian troops get out and go back to Armenia or Azerbaijan. I mean, Armenia or Nagorno-Karabakh. Where are
Well,
these
not
Armenian troops going to go now that they get out, have to leave?
well, no. What is strange? The agreement doesn't say that the Armenian troops have to leave, except from this, have to leave, except from this zone with the point. And nothing says they have to leave. They can stay there, but under Russian control.
I
And
see. They stay there, but the Russians are really running the show.
exactly. And the Russians are controlling two highways, or one of them they have to build it, to control the movement between Armenia proper and what the remaining of Nagorno-Karabakh, and also to control the movement
Okay.
between what is called Nakhichevan, which is a part of Azerbaijan separated from Azerbaijan by Armenia, and Azerbaijan proper. That means the Russians have the total control of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, of course, they have total control of the situation on the base of the Armenian defeat. They are very self-confident, the Russians, because they are sending only 2,000 troops, not very much. 90 tanks, 90 military vehicles. But they know that, for the moment at least, the Azerbaijani are not going to get further. They have their victory. Aliyev is very happy. He can make his dictatorship stronger. The Armenians are absolutely unable to react. They are totally in disarray. And so the Russians can control the situation for the time being. But if you don't find...
But my impression is that the populace of Armenia was not at all ready to accept this, and that they're against this, their prime minister. Isn't there so-called pacifist prime minister or president or whoever he is? Isn't he in danger of losing control?
Yeah, he's in danger. He's physically in danger and he's politically in danger. Because, of course, the Armenian nationalists say that he is responsible of the defeat, which is obviously not true. I mean, the real responsible of the defeat are those who were before on power in Armenia, who never understood that the balance of force was changing, and we wanted to stay with the statu quo, and also so corrupt that part of the money for the army got to their pockets. But of course, today it's easy to say it's because of Nikol Pashinyan. So you have a real risk of a kind of a fascist nationalist regime in Armenia in the near future, which is not a big problem for Vladimir Putin and Russia. And we will not be able, at least for the coming years, to make anything against Azerbaijan because they have not the strength. So we are far from being...
it's not a happy solution.
Yeah. Well,
what would have been a happy solution?
Well, the happy solution...
If you had been given control of the outcome, what would you have chosen?
Of course, the happy solution would have been the application of the Madrid Principle and an agreement on the basis of Nagorno-Karabakh decide from his future. And of course, as the population is mainly Armenian, it will become Armenian. then a security agreement to ensure that this Armenian territory will be linked with Armenia, and the return of all the Azerbaijani refugees to their destroyed villages and cities in the other part of the region. That will be that's still possible, but in a very after another war, so it's even more difficult. The only thing that makes me relatively optimistic is that during this war, despite the very, very, very strong nationalist feeling from both sides, you had the expression of peace voices, both sides, which was very courageous, mainly young people, who expressed through different ways, and also supported, that's also something very interesting, by a lot of Turkish people, because of course Turks is part of the story, because the Turks, Erdogan, the Turkish leaders had been supporting totally Azerbaijan and made this war a personal victory. But maybe because of that, you had a lot of Turks who signed some peace statements together with Azerbaijanis and Armenians. So that could be considered as nothing, but it's not nothing at all. I mean, it shows that there is still a small way, but a way to not reconciliation, but a peaceful way, a peaceful settlement. It's not totally out of.
I think Erdogan is really in control in Turkey, isn't he?
No, he's not. He looks to be totally in control, but he's not really totally in control. He's facing a very, very, very strong financial crisis. He has a big COVID problem. By the way, everybody has a big COVID problem in the region. And half of the population, 50% of the population, is clearly against him. I mean, of course, you can also say that 50% of the population is clearly supporting him. But he's not, he's not, Aliyev in Azerbaijan is controlling 80 or 90% of the population. It's not the case of Erdogan. Of course, these militaristic adventures that he has developed these recent years in Syria, in Libya, this aggressive position he has in the Western Mediterranean is something that he is using for internal reason. I am the Reis, as he said, I am the chief. We are gaining victories and so on. But a lot of Turkish people don't follow that. I mean, they just want, are not very happy with what's going on. And also his relation with Russia is complicated. Russia.
I don't understand that at all.
Well, they can agree to put the European and United States and Western out of the region. For that they agree, and they succeeded. Because today the European and the United States are totally out of the region. But of course, in that done, they have contradictory interest. Mm-hmm. So to a certain, so they are adversary. They are not enemies, but they are adversary. And for example,
maybe my confusion has to do with, I don't understand Erdogan's relationship to NATO and to EU. I mean, Turkey was trying so hard to get into EU and never got an absolute zero, never answer. And sort of my understanding is that they began cozying up to Russia just to show their defiance of Europe and the US. But, so I still don't understand which side he's on,
Well, he's on the Erdoganist side.
He's what?
Erdoganist. I mean, he's supporting himself. He wants to be the new sultan. He wants to be the new, make Turkey a new regional power. He has not all the means to do that, but he had some of the means. But at the beginning, he had a very, very coherent strategy. The strategy was negotiate with the European Union, stay in NATO, develop the Turkish influence. It was put in form by his Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Davutoglu, which became Prime Minister after. But nobody noticed that he has fired this prime minister. The prime minister, Davutoglu, had said, we want zero problem with the neighborhood. But we want to develop the soft power of Turkey and the economical and political influence everywhere around us, like in Ukraine, like in Bosnia-Herzegovina, like in Albania, like in Egypt, like in Iraq. They made the agreement with the Kurds in Iraq, not with the Kurds within Turkey. And we want to have the best possible relation with Russia. And if the Europeans don't want us, just forget about it. And there was a 0-0-0 answer to the attempt for Turkey to go in the European Union by the French president, by Nicolas Sarkozy, explicitly.
Sarkozy said never, never, never?
Yeah, absolutely. And so did François Hollande, and so did Emmanuel Macron. The French said no, no, no.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that firmness. Okay.
But today, Erdogan is not trying to have no problem with the neighborhood. He has problem with all the neighborhood, in a way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Why I say he's not so strong. I mean, because following this kind of ultra-nationalistic, not only Islamic, but, he was a sort of relatively conservative Islamist. His model was the Christian Social Union of Bavaria. He said that.
Bavaria?
Bavaria, in the south of Germany. In the Christian Democrats in Germany, the right wing is the Bavarians, called CSU.
Oh, okay.
And Erdogan once said, my model is CSU. I want to be the equivalent of this conservative but democratic kind of party that you have in Europe as a Christian, me as a Muslim. He said that in the beginning of the 2000s. Today is absolutely an Islamo-nationalist, but I would say more nationalist than Islamo, even if he uses Islam as much as he can. And he's allied with because there's not a majority today in Turkey without the support of the fascist party called MHP, which is a fascist party extremely anti-Armenian and anti-Western.
What do they take? What is their position toward Erdogan?
They support him.
The fascists do.
Yeah.
Okay, that figures. Okay. Okay. So now, what does he get out of this alliance with Azerbaijan?
Well, first of all, the Azerbaijan are allied with Erdogan, but they are not subject to Erdogan. For example, if they have to choose between Russia and Turkey, they can choose Russia. They have much more interest to have good relations with Russia than with Turkey.
But Russia is more in favor of Armenia.
No, Russia is in favor of Russia.
I don't have the right kind of mind.
It's a bit like the Israelis. The Russian population is in favor of Armenians much more than of Azerbaijanis. But the Russian military-industrial complex or the Russian oil complex is much more in favor of Azerbaijan than of Armenia.
Okay.
So Russia is keeping contacts always with Armenia, and Azerbaijan, of course, Azeri people are speaking nearly the same language than the Turks, and they have a lot of connection between Azerbaijan and Turkey, but the powers are not the same. I mean, it's totally a false idea to understand Aliyev in Azerbaijan as a sort of a puppet from Erdogan. No, he's he has his total autonomy. And of course, he's very pleased to have Turkey on his side, but he's not at all a vassal of Erdogan.
Okay, what does this do to the whole dynamics of the larger region? That is, if you include, Russia, Turkey, etc. Well, the U.S. isn't, I guess, relevant anymore. But I'm wondering what was Putin's game plan? You make it sound as if he was deliberately waiting until the right moment to move and to take the position that he took the few days ago, because that puts him in charge. And was that all he was looking out for? Was to get control in the region with his peacekeepers and so on, or and if so, what does that have to do with Turkey? Because it's really, the relationship between Turkey and Russia seems to be changing, or has over the last couple of years. I guess they've become closer. Um, for example, Turkey buys weapons from Russia now, and the U.S. didn't much like that, right? Because they were part of NATO and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think, this war, what difference is it going to make now that there's sort of an outcome? And maybe it's not a final outcome, but it sounds like it's going to stay in place for a while. What's that going to do to the strength of different players in the region?
Well, difficult to say, but for sure it is an outcome. Of course, we don't know what will be the situation in a few years. It's a victory for Putin. I'm totally sure that he wait for the right time to intervene from the beginning. I'm practically convinced that he knew about the Azerbaijani offensive, because he's supposed to have some good secret services, and he has satellite and so on, so he could, and didn't tell the Armenians to waiting for
now, didn't most of the Armenians trust that he was their friend, and they were surprised that he didn't come and help them sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so he has a great victory, because of course he doesn't control Azerbaijan, but the Azerbaijani will be very happy that it ended like that, at least for the present time. And he let Turkey out of the settlement. The Turks are now negotiating to have some kind of monitoring of the ceasefire. But the Russians have said, okay, but without any Turkish troops on the ground. You can just
fly over and look down or something.
Send a few diplomats if you want. We don't mind, but maybe we will ask also 2 French to come to make it more, something like that. And so that's a very complex relation between Turkey and Russia, because at the same time, during the same moment, the Turks and the Russians are negotiating and fighting each other in Syria and in Libya. They are negotiating together and fighting each other. In Syria, the Russians are supporting the Assad regime, and Turks are supporting the rebels. In Libya, Russians are supporting the so-called Western forces, that is the people supported by Egypt and the Emirates, and also by France, by the way. And the Turks are supporting the other forces, which are supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, by the Turks, who send some soldiers and some weapons, and by the Italian. So you see the complexity of the situation.
The Italians were engaged.
Italians and French not supporting the same camp. Look like how ridiculous the situation is. And of course, Russian and Turks use that. But at the same time, the Turks are making some weapons agreements with the Ukrainian, which can be a provocation against the Russian. These famous drones that they have used in Azerbaijan, they are going to sell it, the Turkish drones, to sell it to the Ukrainians. And of course, the Russians don't like it at all. So they are not really stabilizing the region.
Is there anybody with a bigger vision of what could be done to create a more decent kind of stability?
Well, in the short term, I don't see anybody because the Europeans have themselves put themselves out of the game. I mean, and the Americans too. I mean, 20 years ago, the voice of the Europeans and the Americans were listened to in the region. So now you have just commercial oil companies who are acting in the region.
At least there are young people who are interested in peace. But you, in a previous conversation with you, I believe you said that it was hard to get them to speak on the record about their feelings while the war was going on. Would you say that there can now be some kind of movement that would integrate the activists or the pro-peace forces in all of these countries, and a meeting of some kind, a Helsinki Citizens Assembly, for example?
After the first war, after the war of 1988 to 1994, there were real activities, peace activities in the region. For example, Armenians and Azerbaijanis was regularly meeting in Georgia, because Georgia was a neutral country, and supported by Georgian activists locally. And they had some support from Westerners, from Russians, peace activists, I mean, and also to a certain extent from some official bodies like European Union. It disappeared progressively in the after 2003, 2004, and especially after 2011, I would say. It has to be renewed. For example, we are looking to see if it would not immediately, but in the near future, if we have the possibility to make meeting in Georgia. We have much more Russians involved in peace activities than before. You have a lot of people abroad. The diaspora has been widened. I mean, you have now Azerbaijani people meeting with Armenian people in Berlin or in Prague or in London and discussing what to do. Not so much in Paris, unfortunately. And just for the moment, the problem is in Armenia, you have in a defeat situation, and those who want to raise their voice for peace will be immediately considered as traitors, even if there is still a freedom of speech in Armenia. And in Azerbaijan, anybody who say, okay, we win the war, but now we have to be tolerant, are spoiling the victory to a certain extent. But already some did. Already some Azerbaijani people did that.
So I expect you're going to be involved in that. If anything happens, you'll be there.
Well, of course, as much as I can, because also we have also COVID making things complicated.
This has been extremely interesting. That's very helpful.
You can't be optimistic in the short term. And some people from former Yugoslavia at the end of the war of Yugoslavia had invented the concept of post-pessimism.
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 Well, okay, you and I can be post-pessimists, but
excellent. It was young people from Kosovo, from Serbia, from Bosnia-Herzegovina. They invented this post-pessimist.
Thank you so much, and we'll be back in touch.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.